it up. Everything's working. Okay. Well, I hope we didn't take you away from anything too important.
Don't worry.
Okay.
What is it that you're doing now, so I can get some idea of what perspective you're coming from?
Okay. I'm doing a book on the entire X-15 program. It's there were several books that were written prior to the program really getting going, or just after the program got going, and such as your own book, and there's about 3 or 4 others. I think Jules Bergman wrote one, and things like that. But nobody's written a real historical document, putting the whole thing in its historical perspective. So that's what I'm trying to do is compile everything into one source.
That's pretty sporty course. Of course, all those books you're referencing, except mine, are totally in error.
Oh, of course. That's why I want to come right to the source. Yeah.
There was Caden and Tregaskis, and who was it you mentioned?
Jules Bergman.
Jules Bergman, and an awful lot of presumption.
Oh, yes. Yes, I remember. I think Bergman's was written before the first flight had even taken place, so that was really full of presumption.
That wouldn't disturb him very much.
Yes, I've run into Jules several times, and it's a rather interesting experience, to say the least.
Julie baby.
Oh, yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. All right. Quick question to start out with. You mentioned in your book that you had a rather different master's thesis. Could you give me a quick explanation of exactly what that was?
Oh, everybody was trying to see a master's thesis in those days, had to respond to a requirement to be a new and innovative contribution to the art. That's pretty sporty. So most students try to come up with some very complex thing, or a very long thing. So I devoted all of my effort to coming up with a very simplified way to determine the characteristics of wings based on their climb path. And my whole thesis was only 20 pages long, including all the figures and table of contents and all of that. And I've forgotten even the name of it. It was the semi-empirical method of determining the static and dynamic derivatives of a wing based on climb. A real long title, almost as long as the thesis. But it was a very useful one. People still use it today for first cuts at the effects of wings at subsonic speeds based on climb. It was a way to use what I call degenerate mathematics to reduce things to the simple form, squares and circles, and then let them go to the distorted form. It's too complicated to handle mathematically in that form. That was what that was about. I remember when I took it to the university library, the librarian hefted it, see, that's a thesis. I just thought, the quality is better than the quantity.
That's right.
I believe that's what I was referring to.
Yes. Okay. You said that you wanted to go to Bell to help expedite the X2 program when it was first going along. Do you think that you would have been able to have changed anything that happened on that program if you had gone to them?
Oh, yes. I really do. The real enthusiasm for research airplanes and the X2 at Bell had kind of died. The primary people had gone on to different Crusader himself was running it. And the X2 was in serious trouble, way over cost. It was way behind in schedule. And they had attempted to put an electrical control system in it that just couldn't work.
Is that a fly-by-wire system?
Well, it was literally fly-by-wire, but they had constantly running motors that were clutched with a torque converter to give the different torques to the surfaces. And we were worried about it. It was just way ahead of its time. It had a lot of hard over signals that could occur. So in fact, one time I studied it pretty heavily, and then I got Pete Everest, who was a colonel at that time, and pretty key to the Air Force putting money into it, to do something with a stick that I knew in the simulator that I knew would feed back and almost pull him out of the cockpit. And so we got some changes made in that. And I felt that if I could go to Bell and provide the single purpose or single-mindedness that they needed to put back in the program, I could get that airplane out of there and get rid of a lot of this. Frankly, make work, study, and analyze, try to reach too far technically. Doc Dryden was very conservative old soul. He couldn't buy that at all. He thought that was not proper. That's why I left the NACA to go do exactly that on the X-15. And I think the results were pretty evident.
Oh, yes.
It came in on time and on money. The money was more and the time was about 3 months late. We had changed mother airplanes, put in an interim engine, and had serious trouble in the engine end of the airplane. And we never charged for a whole lot of the changes that NACA or NASA made on the airplane, simply because we were on a cost plus, and really all that negotiation would negotiate a little more profit, which wasn't worth the time and effort.
Concerning the Bell proposal for their version of the X-15 and the Douglas and everybody else, how do you think that those compared to the North American design? Did you think that any of the others had a better possible configuration than what we ended up with?
Not better. They were all designed to meet the same specs, and they would have all met those specs. The Bell airplane was, to my mind, the best proposal, but maybe not the best airplane, but it was kind of a toss-up. The Republic airplane followed traditional Republic design. It was heavy, complicated, and they had never done that kind of airplane before. Bell, there was ample evidence that they had been in the rocket airplane business before. They were kind of expert. North Americans showed some engineering ingenuity in their approach to it, and flexibility. They actually proposed an airplane that had much more capability than the basic RFP spec went after. The Douglas airplane was the only one that was truly designed to meet the RFP alone. It was a magnesium airplane. It would do exactly and only exactly what the design was asked to do, and gave no flexibility. And probably would have been a great deal cheaper. Well, that's hard to say, because the X-15 cost $87 million, including rebuilding two. And so cheaper might have been $67 million. That's hard to really evaluate it, because they could have had trouble too. That would have run those 87 million.
Yes.
The magnesium they used because the time that it would be going through the heat cycle was so short, and magnesium has a very high thermal inertia and conductivity. It would distribute that heat through the airplane and never get so hot that it was any consequence. But any local hotspot would become like a thermite bomb. We were a little worried about that, and probably wouldn't, you know, Douglas is a reputable company. They made a mistake of responding to the RFP. Whereas North American and Bell came in with an airplane that responded to the design spec for the RFP, plus a lot more capable, which is, you know, more for the money.
I think the Douglas proposal had the pictures of the models I've seen of their proposal had a offline thrust axis that looked like. Do you know if that was true or not, or if it was just a function of the model that I saw? If you looked at the back end, the thrust chamber was down here.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I was just curious what that was for.
I don't remember that.
Okay.
You know, the thrust axis would have to go through, hopefully coincide with the drag axis and the principal axis, so you get some pretty wild motions.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at that model for. It looked like it would be really unstable. Yeah.
No, they wouldn't propose them unstable.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the requirements was that the airplane be aerodynamically stable through the speed range, because of our experience with the X2 and the X1A.
You had a quote in your book that said that someone said about all this airplane will do is prove the bravery of the pilot. Can you tell me who said that? I didn't think so.
Yeah, I can.
All right.
Yeah. That quote came out of a meeting where the missile people, the unmanned people, were arguing that this program should be done without a pilot and it should be done with a pilot. Now that I think I know, I can tell you who said it, but I don't want to lay that on him.
I take it he's still around then.
Oh yeah, real good guy.
Okay.
And the reason he said it was because his company elected not to go with the X-15, but to challenge that they could do it without it. He didn't like this. So see, he was stuck with the company line. You'd know who if I said his name before.
Okay. We'll protect him. Yes.
Yeah, you would.
There was a lot of difficulties with the LR-99 engine early in the program. Do you think that Rocketdyne was even called in to make a replacement engine, and it never really got anywhere? It was sort of late in the development. Do you ever think that the 99 should have been dropped in favor of another engine?
No. I don't really think there was all that much difficulty. It was a new engine, with a new fuel, totally new concept of a throttleable engine, and it was hard to do. And there were difficulties with it. See, if you have trouble with the airframe, you may bend something. If you have trouble with an engine, you blow up the whole span. But actually, I don't think that the difficulties were all that traumatic. The engine was delayed. They had overestimated their ability to do it in the beginning, but that's pretty normal when you're trying to do something new, because you can't schedule, you can't cost trouble. Because until you go to do it, you don't really know what that's going to be. And if you think of the X-15, it had its share of troubles. We broke it, we blew it up, we had fires. We had some design errors in it. So I don't think Rocketdyne could have really done that job any better. In the first place, they would have gone to a JP engine, and that's not as efficient. They didn't know how to make a throttleable engine any more than Thiokol, and Thiokol had actually been in the rocket airplane, manned rocket engine, longer than anybody in the world. In fact, long before anybody made a reliable rocket system, I made the Germans or anybody, we'd flown over 250 manned rocket flights on RMI engines. X1 and the D5582 by 1953, They'd flown over 250 flights without a fatality. Maybe. In 1953, the Redstone was the first successful program that von Braun was ever involved in, which is the first of anybody except the Bob Truax RMI engines that came out of the Navy. And they're the same kinds of systems. The V2, your chances were about 50-50 when you lit the candle, it would survive.
Yeah.
And none of the others were doing it. It wasn't until 53 that really the Viking and the Redstone did any good. In fact, it was those engines that made us begin thinking about the X-15. Naturally, you're going to go to the people with the best track record, and that was RMI, who were bought out by 2000.
I understand at one time that they were considering the Viking engine for the X-15. How far did that proposal get?
I think our initial analysis used Viking information as that part in the book about the X-15 being invented on the back of an envelope is very true. Coming home with Walt Williams from a fishing trip one night, Krasinski and Bensel were asleep in the back end, and we were just talking, and we heard over the radio that they just made a successful firing of the Viking engine in Santa Susana, 75,000 pounds of thrust. Just out of curiosity, I wonder what the hell kind of an airplane we could make. And I literally got a piece of scrap paper, an envelope, out of his glove compartment, and we came up with what was awful close to the X-15 spec, which you might expect. You know, how much energy you got, thrust you got, how high, how fast. We were estimating then an airplane of around 30,000 pounds that would go to Mach 6 or 7. That's the way it came out.
What year was that?
That was probably 1952.
So nobody really got serious about the X-15 for about another 2 years.
Well, we had to go through all of the... See, anytime you do something of this nature, you have a concept, and then you have to draw up and sell the criteria. What are you talking about? And you have to write requirements. And you do this in the government. All this takes time. Then you have to write a performance spec. Then you go out to procure and get a detailed spec. Then you start making it. All of that puts it down into a long thing. So probably in 50, say it was 52 or 3, I forget. By 54, I was very active. Contractors let 55, which is pretty fast from an harebrained idea to a contract.
Turned out to be a pretty good harebrained idea, though.
It was a good airplane. Most successful research program I think we ever done.
Can you detail your preparations for a flight? I know that your preparations were probably more extensive than a regular pilot at that point.
Stay sober the night before and get at least 4 hours sleep.
Okay.
I generally work pretty late the night before the flight to make sure all things. See, I was on the design team of that airplane and had quite a responsibility for the flight test program as well as flying. And one thing I never have been able to get people to appreciate, I was a test pilot only in that was an inherent part of building better airplanes. I wasn't a test pilot to be a test pilot. I was a test pilot because I'm an engineer and a designer. And to my mind, there's no damn way to specialists never build anything of use anyway. Everything comes out as a committee would build. I think probably that single purpose in my mind helped the X-15 be as successful as it was. So generally, I was much more involved in the program than I was in just the flying. I designed a lot of it and contributed to it. So my preparation for flight really wasn't all that extensive. In fact, we used to laugh. The flight surgeon was Toby Friedman. And Friedman never was where he belonged on time in his life. So I'd be all suited up walking to the airplane, and he'd come screeching up in his car and run over, and I'd take his pulse and say, "Hey, you're going to make it today, Doc. Let's go." That's it.
Okay.
But really, the preparation was engineering preparation. I hope that you can get this through as you're trying to do it. Is that a flight test or a test flight has to be designed and implemented just as carefully as you design and build a wing spar. Because you leave no known chance or even calculated risk. We engineer the whole thing. And there is no such thing as an accident. Something's either designed wrong, built wrong, or used wrong. And generally it's used wrong because you have a lot of time to think about the design and building. When you use it, it gets more dynamic. So there's more room to make mistakes. So on a flight test, everything is very carefully planned out. And you deviate from your plan with great reluctance. But that's why you have a guy there too, so that he can use judgment and deviate. But the flying end of the X-15 program was really not just incidental, only a small part of it. I wanted to.
Well, you were really one of the first test pilot engineers, weren't you? Most of the others were just the pilots that come out of the war, Jaeger, those people.
Well, yes and no. If you remember, Eddie Allen was a legitimate PhD.
Yeah.
He was test flying from early 20s until he was killed in 42. And Jimmy Doolittle was a legitimate PhD. By and large, though, after the war, test pilots were ex-military pilots with a modicum of engineering training, and didn't really get involved in the program except to do the flying in response to somebody else's design. Well, I kind of started, it was early on in the chain. The NACA had always required that their pilots be degreed engineers. In fact, they weren't qualified, they were called, they were aeronautical research pilots. But they really never had much opportunity to be really on the leading edge until we got into the research airplanes. They were behind the company. You're right, I did kind of start this era. But again, I didn't do it to be a test pilot. I did it because I felt that was the way you design and build better airplanes.
That definitely paid off.
It did on the X-15, which was really the only chance I ever had to try.
Speaking of engineering of the airplane, one thing I've always wondered about, the skids on the aircraft. Was there ever any engineering attempt to flush them into the fuselage, or were they always something that was going to be hanging out the side?
Well, we went around and around on that. Initially, we had a wide variety of them. They were up near the CG, where you typically put wheels. Never occurred to anybody they could be otherwise. You land and you let the nose down. We'd had skids on the X2 with certain success, but we're convinced we didn't want one skid, so we were going to have it. We didn't know how we were going to cool it, and so that pretty much said no tires. And then when I wanted to put that big tail on the back end and make sure that it was directionally stable over the whole speed range, I didn't have the weight budget for that. Until it dawned on us, I'd say, really all of this is collective. It dawned on us that we could take the weight that we were dedicating to carrying a midsection landing gear and use that strength that was already in the airplane for the engine room. And why not? may mean that we'd have to add a couple of pounds to the nose wheel to take the additional shock. But that airplane wasn't going to bounce and go flying again if you had that thing back in. And so we moved it back there and putting that's not a high temperature region, not as high as many other planes. We're forward on the airplane. And decided that we could snug those up against the fuselage as the simplest, easiest way to store. And they were gravity fall and no actuation. They just fell down kerchunk and locked in place. And it's just a very simple way to do it. And strangely enough, I never had any trouble with heating on the skids, either on the landing at high speed or in the air. On the landing, that lake bed dust seemed like it would collect the heat out of the skid rather than the skid heat up. You know, you put something to a grind wheel, it gets hot. But the skid and that dust, you go put your hand on the track and it's hot. But the skid itself is not really very.
It's unusual.
Remarkable, yeah. Well, I guess you could probably figure out why.
They were definitely well-designed skids. You know, later in the program on the A2, they had trouble with the skids coming out at around Mach 4 on a couple of flights. And,
did they? I didn't.
Yeah.
On the A2?
On the A2, the stretch version, the number 2 airplane.
When they put the tanks on?
Right.
Did they stretch it too?
Yeah, it was stretched about almost 3 feet. And apparently the control cables, they didn't stretch the control cables enough to take the fluctuation because of heat. And so when the thing's flying along and the heat started to seep in there, it would pull the cable and release the gear.
See, that's second hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a lot of trouble with cables on that because when it was cold on the ground, or cold in the air with liquid oxygen, it would shrink about an inch or so.
Yeah.
And so we had to have tensioners on all the cables. And then when it would get hot, of course, it would expand. That inch plus maybe another.
Had to leave a lot of room in there for that to cover.
But that's a simple thing.
Oh, yeah.
I'm so a little surprised.
That apparently happened on several different flights. I've got the flight reports on it. In fact, they even put a sticker on the control panel as a little reminder to the pilots that said, "Do not extend gear above Mach 4.2." It's on there for a long time.
I didn't know about that. See, when I left the program, I went on Apollo and got buried up to here and didn't pay any attention to it. I can't take you past about December 60. And I went on Apollo after that.
So right after you left the program, that was the end of it? You weren't involved with any of the follow-on proposals?
Finished the program, the demonstration part of the program, December 7th or 8th, I've forgotten, in 1960. And I transferred over to Downey, I believe, January or February 61, so just a couple of months later. And went on the Saturn Apollo combo. And I didn't pay any attention to the 15.
So you weren't involved in any of the follow-on proposals at all?
Only what I heard.
Yeah. Another trivia thing. There were some times when the NASA logo on the tail, sometimes they had it on there and sometimes not. Was there any reason why some aircraft had it at certain
No,
times?
your premise is wrong. The first thing they did when they delivered the airplane to NASA was paint the logo on it.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime you see an airplane without the logo on it, that's a North American flag.
I see.
With the
Okay.
logo on it, that's a NASA flag.
Okay.
And boy, there was no sometimes about it. Really, the first thing they did.
I understand.
They towed it in the hangar and put their logo on it. And never came out. And took North American off the flag.
Okay. So it's our airplane now. They didn't have anything to do with it. What was the purpose of the corrugation along the back of the fairings and the tail surfaces? Was that for heat expansion and contraction?
On
Yes.
that web and
Right.
the back and the front part of the tip. just for stiffness of that web. That's a common technique to, like corrugated roof. If you made a corrugated roof out of a flat sheet, you couldn't pick it up, could you?
It's true, yeah.
And
Okay.
it's just rigidity and stiffness.
Okay.
And I don't know, it probably gives some flex that would offset the thermal stress. I really don't know. But that's a common technique to get stiffness in the wood.
Can you tell me more about your experiences with the LR99 flights? Your book ends just before you got into that phase of the testing. Anything specific that happened?
Well, the LR99, as long as we had it in the test plan and in the airplane, actually did a beautiful job. It was a fine piece of engineering. And I don't remember that we ever had any trouble with the LR99.
It seemed everything went real well on it from the flight
Well, I
reports.
only flew it 3 flights. I demonstrated those points that were required by Contractor to deliver an airplane that would fly, not necessarily well, but would now be ready to do the research program. I never, the LR99, I know it in Boonton where they developed it, RMI developed it. They had a number of explosions and that, but I don't know if that was engine or system or what. And when we blew up the airplane, that was not the engine. That was our propulsion system. But when the little engine blew up and broke the airplane on Rosamond, that was a potential failure that had been in that engine probably since 1944. And the coincidence of circumstance had never added up to give us that particular one. You look at it and you just said, oh, hell, that's always been a potential.
Was the LR11 the one that used in the X-15, were those new engines or were they recycled from the old X1
I think they were
program?
recycled.
They were, okay.
I think those same engines were, pieces of them I know in almost every program we ever did. The X1, the D5582, all of the X1s, because we just had a bunch of engines and we cannibalized and got new parts and put them on, got a working engine, and that's the next one that went into the airplane. And they were quite simple and apparently very rugged. I don't know if those were new, they were certainly refurbished. Were the LR11s?
Yeah.
There wasn't much difference between the LR4, what was it, 4, 6, and 8, and 5, 7, 9, and 11. The odd numbers were Navy, and even in the airport. It's really just the part number stamp.
You left the program after 3 flights on the LR99 flights. One of the major testing points in the X-15 was the altitude program. Did you ever attempt to try to get some test flights in the altitude region using the RCS system and stuff? Wasn't that part of the contract to test out that system?
Civilian professionals aren't allowed to make records. My contract very clear, each North American contract very clearly called out the limit of Mach 2 and 100,000 feet, which would break my record. But you couldn't keep it down to Mach 2, so they opened that up to Mach 3. So I never went over 95,000 feet, seems to me, and I did go over Mach 3 by the cockpit instrument. I don't even know what the internal documentation is. No, I never had any possibility of going for any one of them.
Nobody ever asked to have like one flight just to test out the basic systems?
Oh, no
Yeah.
way.
Okay.
No way. They wanted to do that themselves.
Everybody wants the candy for themselves.
Well, it's NASA claims to be pure in their technical things, but they don't mind making a record now. And I started that Mach 2.
Let's see. You already mentioned you didn't do anything with the A2 at all. Can you tell me then about your time at North America, and then after you left, you went directly to the Apollo program? What did you do on the Apollo program?
Well, Harrison Storms, who was the chief engineer at Los Angeles, who built the X-15, or was the driving force, was made president of the missile division in Downey, which was about to become defunct and closed doors. But he was a very ambitious guy, and he took about 20 of us over there that everybody called the stormtroopers. And it was kind of, let's see if I can go back. The North American Aerophysics Lab was at Downey. And it was a company that came up with all of those brilliant people and ideas that formed Autonetics and formed Rocketdyne. And a lot of their other programs elsewhere, they were a think tank. A lot of brilliant academicians there, and they kind of began to go downhill. All their talent went to Rocketdyne and Autonetics, and they weren't going anywhere. And they had the Hound Dog missile program, which was very sophisticated for its day, trying to do with vacuum tubes then what we were doing with transistors. And Storms went over there, and everybody thought to hold a moratorium on the division. It would eventually go out of business, and the Hound Dog program was over. Well, he had different ideas. First, he got them to give him a name called Space and Information Systems Division. His charter was in his name. And he brought about 20 of us over, and he told me to straighten out the Hound Dog test program and get involved in the Saturn. And he was going after the second stage Saturn booster, which was the first of the whole lunar program RFPs to go out. Everybody said, no way, this stinking little division is going to get it. Well, we got it. And actually, that was probably the biggest technological challenge of the whole Apollo program, was that second stage booster. And then we went after the Apollo, and everybody said, there's no way you're going to get two major contracts back to back. Well, we got the contracts for the Apollo and the service module, the command and the service module, and the Earth escape system. So Apollo was really North America. It had all North American engines in it. We built the second stage and the command and service module. And Douglas bent a little 10 for the third stage, and Boeing bent some 10 for the first stage. And Stormy was pretty much the guy that did that. When you work for a man like that, the rest of the world doesn't exist. You work 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we put together the Apollo program, and I was responsible for all of the quality assurance, the reliability engineering, and the systems test, which anytime two pieces came together, came under my wing, and then all of the bases, like the Cape and Mississippi Test Facility, White Sands, and all that. So that made me the policeman. Reliability was the policeman on engineering, and the quality assurance was the policeman on the factory, and the whole design for that matter. And of course, the test was a verification of a policing job too, to see that the engineering criteria were in fact met. But you didn't let the engineers do it. You let somebody else who wouldn't lie about it. Now they wouldn't intentionally lie about it, but it's awful hard for a man proud of the design to go make a test and come back and say, hey boss, my design's no good.
Oh, yeah.
It's terribly hard. And so I did all of the testing, the systems testing. So we set up the Cape and all. And then from there on, it deteriorates because of difficulties with NASA and internal politics. So I got fired.
When did that occur?
1965. New Year's Eve of 65.
What did you do after that then?
Well, I stayed just off the program and removed from that particular controversy.
I see.
You can see that the program managers in NASA would not like to have an independent company function in such critical position because they don't control that kind of replacement. He calls them as he sees them. And that created some problems. But it did set up the discipline that took us to the moon. It served.
Getting back to the X-15 for a moment here.
That's all I know.
Yeah. Okay. You once said that ejecting from a rocket plane was like committing suicide to keep from getting killed. Did you think the X-15 system, ejection system, was that way also?
No. We didn't have any escape system in the other. They had jettisonable noses in the E5581, the E5582, and the X2, but they were quite unstable. If you let them go, level flight at 8/10, you'd probably take so many negative G's that your brain would get problems. So no man in his right mind, unless he ran out of anything else to do, would ever use them. And on the X1, if you bailed out of that side door opening on it, you'd go on both sides of the wing. And on the X4 and the XF92, they had ejection seats, but they were those old backcrackers that would give you about 21 Gs at about 1,000 G per second rate of onset. Really a risk of breaking your back. That was before they had rocket thrusters.
They're using 20mm shells or something like that.
Yeah, well, they had to get all of that velocity in a very short stroke until they got to rocket suits. And that's why the original 104 ejected down, because it didn't have to eject as fast, because there's no tail.
Yeah, that's where that tail.
Eject it up, it goes through the tail. I would have hesitated to use the X-15, but I would have had a lot more confidence in any of the others. And I pretty much designed that system. Originally, they wanted an encapsulated escape system, which would have, one, been more complicated than the airplane, and two, would have weighed the airplane out of the performance cable. And we won that battle, so we used the pressure suit as an escape deck, and the seat. And it was a flyable seat, at least stable. I don't know, the criteria were that you could bail out at Mach 4 at 90,000 feet going up. Well, at that, whether you open a parachute or not, you're going to go through a whole trajectory out there, and you have a sustained heating problem. So we had to design the suit, this helmet, and that. He would have been pretty warm by the time we went through that. For a couple of 3 minutes, very high Mach number heating. And that's what we designed. At low altitude, it probably would be a very good escape. Nobody ever tried to use it.
How do you feel about the fact that there was never a direct follow-on to the X-15? We had a real progression of research aircraft up to that, but nothing after that.
I was broken-hearted. The country was stupid. We proposed an orbital X-15 in 1958, which would have been a prototype shuttle. And I appreciate that was almost 30 years ago. I don't know what the urgency of keeping up with the Russians in space. The fact that the Flickinger and Lovelace had the MISS program, Man in Space Soonest, which was an aeromedical experiment going on the way, which became Mercury. And And then a guy named Max Faget at NASA and the Germans had a terrible disdain for pilots and wings. And they won because it was expedient. We spent an awful lot of money on dead-end programs. Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo were dead ends. And so we had to go back and kind of start from scratch with a lot better engineering base, true. But I think that we would have been in the space station and had a shuttle many years before we did if we'd have gone ahead with the orbital X-15, which would have worked. It wouldn't have looked like an X-15, but it would have had a lot of the elements. We were going to use 2 Navajo boosters in the X-15 as a troika, and that would have gone orbital. And we think we had a way to lick the heat. It wouldn't have been tiles, I guarantee you.
What would it have been?
Well, we were running beryllium oxide leading surfaces, and they were surviving our best capability to blast them with a plasma jet to give them the Q and the temperatures and that sort of thing. And no, that would work. And we would probably have had to swap the wings for our appreciate things of that nature. Probably reshape the front end.
Do you think for the Delta wing would have been better?
Yeah, you know, all of that's so relative. You'd have to study it, and depending upon the materials and what you're trying to do, would determine what the wing shape is. It's not so simple to say a Delta wing better than a straight wing or otherwise. A lot of people said the X-15 should have had a swept wing in Delta. Well, it was a pretty damn good flying airplane with straight. And that argument never works. The 104 was straight, the F-100 was swept. And they had essentially the same capabilities with different advantages and disadvantages.
Now they have the X-29 with forward swept, going the other direction.
Well, I'm going to have to watch it. I can't understand it all. we've been building Mach 2 aluminum airplanes since 1953.
Seems to be all the planning to do.
Oh,
Yeah.
So, we've got more going on that, hopefully.
Do you think we should restart the research airplane line?
Oh, I don't think we should ever have stopped.
Yeah.
There's a whole void of arena between Mach 2 and orbital speed. And the research airplanes that we would like to have done years ago and would like to do now will end up with single stage to orbit. Take off like an airplane, go to orbit. And that's good. But you're going to take air breathers. You just can't afford to carry that 80% load of oxygen that the shuttles carry. Nothing but oxygen in that weight, that load.
Do you feel that? Let me rephrase it. I got one question here too. Do you know whatever happened to the simulator they used in the X-15?
X-15 simulator? Vegas.
Okay, I've been trying to locate
I
that.
never used them very much because we didn't want to learn any bad habits. We didn't know what to put in them before we flew. So as a procedural trainer, they were great, but the aerodynamics that were in them were pure guesswork. You don't want to practice and learn dynamic skills on something that isn't like what you do.
It's true. Yeah. Well, did you ever consider yourself of going into the astronaut program at all, or did you wanted to stay with the engineering side of it?
Well, no, I was convinced we were going to build an orbital X-15. I never thought that it wasn't just such a logical follow-on, and I wanted to stay on that. And I did consider going into the astronaut program, the military program. In fact, I was on the group that set up the criteria with Randy Lovelace and Jim Flickinger on the selection criteria. And it's kind of interesting. They took me to supper one night, asked me not to volunteer or to put in for it. And I asked them why not. I said, well, we're friends of yours. We don't want to have to turn you down.
That was nice of them.
Why would you turn me down? You're too independent. I had a bad habit of turning off the radio when I didn't like all the help I was getting from the ground. And that was the feeling in those days, that the ground should control it. And it wasn't really till Wally Schirra caused a showdown on the Apollo program that the commander got back in command of his craft. Up until then, these guys were acting kind of as telemetered robots. We got that straightened out. There's only be one captain. He's got to be in sight, or else you'll know. The reason I turn off the radio is that the engine man, he knew the engine, but he didn't see the whole picture like I did. Hydraulics man, he knew the hydraulics, but he didn't see the whole picture. So you get all kinds of advice, and it wasn't worth it. It was garbage. And it wouldn't answer a question you asked because you're the only one that was in the position to know what question to ask, because you'd seen the problem develop. So I'd turn off the radio and solve it. They didn't care.
You even flew a couple of flights on the X-15 with radio difficulties, didn't you, where you actually had to just click out the answers and things?
North America never put all that stock in the radio being essential to the safety of the flight. Sure, you'd like to have a radio and you would fix it, but to cancel a flight just because the radio wasn't working well, and the chances are it would work when we got away from B-52.
What was the reason for that?
Oh, interference, crosstalk, there are antennas all over the airplane in the B-52. I think most of that.
Why did Walt Williams go to leave the X-15 program. I know he was working for NASA. He was your boss at NASA for a long time, right? He was
the primary guy to get the X-15 rolling in NASA, really. He left what became Dryden, or the high-speed flight station out there, to save the Mercury from a national disgrace. He did. Mercury was thick. And if you remember, it was in serious trouble. And at that time, with McDonald and that part of NASA, nobody had ever really learned the kind of discipline you have to bring to a program to fly men in space and stop and think. All of the missiles that we had made, and those were the people who were doing this. After about 20 flights, you had about a 70% confidence level that the damn thing was going to work. That was classical history of those things. Well, when you've got manned systems, you can't accept that. You have to expect the thing is going to work the first flight. You don't want to kill 20 people before you get 75% chance. So that was the main thing I think I brought to Apollo. We changed the whole discipline, the way we did things. From putting the reliability and the quality in it from when you drew the first center line on a piece of paper. Not tried to inspect it in way downstream. Well, I had learned this from Walt Williams. That's why we were so successful over those years. We killed one man at NASA and all the X-15 and all of the research airplane years when every flight was something somebody had never really done before. And he was killed by an engine failure, which was born of ignorance, not lack of caution. We didn't know how to run jet engines. We were running them wrong at that time, and he paid a price for it. But Walt Williams went to Mercury because it was sick. Nobody had any confidence that it was going to go on. And he pulled that one out and brought the disciplines to Gemini and wrote the book for Apollo. And was the guy that made the go, no-go decisions and probably solved the tile problem on the space shuttle. Phenomenal guy. See, he was in on our program from the X-1 as a glider all the way through to just recently. He's still working on engine. Probably he has done more than all of the Von Braun, Gilruth, Stacks, and me put together on this particular program. Never got much credit. Very remarkable guy. When you think that he has been the operational conscience and disciplinarian for all these years. And that's where our successes come from. There's a book. Nobody will give him credit because all of the newspapers, guys who like to see their names in the newspapers, would hate like hell. Let anybody know there was some respectable brain. I don't knock Von Braun. He was a brilliant, wonderful guy. But frankly, it took guys like Walt Williams to make Von Braun crystal work. It really did.
Did he volunteer for the Mercury program when he saw the program was in trouble, or was he asked by NASA to change?
I think they appealed to his patriotic duty. Because I remember he didn't want to leave Edwards. He thought, that was where he belonged. He'd built it, huh?
The X-15 was the hottest thing going, and he was just getting into the flight testing on that, so it seemed hard to leave that.
Yeah. And no, he'd built Edwards from a crew of 12 people to that big laboratory out there. And that was his. They ought to call it Williams Laboratory down in Dryden. I think that's. But the fairness is, he doesn't really give a damn either. He knows himself who built these things. Go ahead. We're not going to have too much time.
Oh, okay. Just on some general opinions and things. You mentioned in your book again that you said that you find it hard to justify more than one crewman in an aircraft. Do you believe, even with the advances and stuff today that can really up the pilot workload and stuff, that we should still keep it down to one, or do you think a second is justified?
More so. With all the automation and reliability we have out of digital electronics today, and transistorize it, but really it's hard to figure out what to give a pilot to do as far as systems management. So all you carry an extra guy along for it in case you have a heart attack. And then, how would you satisfy the need for no discrimination of women and race and country and all of that if you didn't carry 5 or 6 people? I don't see any reason why you should have more than one pilot or even an engineer. Most of our current, they're very reliable.
Yeah.
Present-day airliner, for instance, is one of the most reliable things in the world.
Hey, you worked for Eastern Airlines for a while, is that correct?
I worked for Eastern Airlines from 67 to 72.
What did you do there?
I was so-called Vice President of Flight Technical Development. Primarily, I was responsible for everything forward of the cockpit bulkhead, all of the pilot instrumentation control systems, those things. Eastern probably provides the best cockpits in the air. Like a lot of airlines just specify Eastern cockpits.
Did you do flight testing?
No, no, the union wouldn't let me fly an Eastern airplane.
You worked for the company, but you couldn't fly the airplanes?
I could go to Boeing and do the acceptance flight on an airplane because it's Boeing's airplane. But the minute I signed a piece of paper and I was acceptance authority and became Eastern, I couldn't get in either cockpit. Either seat.
How much flight testing have you done since the X-15 program?
Damn little. Very little. T-39 work, some F-100 work, and then really nothing after that. Did some chase work on the paraglider, and that was it.
Were you ever involved in the B-70 program at all?
No, I gave that to Al White because he was my backup pilot in the X-15. And he was laying awake nights figuring out how he could break my leg so he could get in the X-15. While he'd already was slated for it, I was chief pilot. I was happy to see him take the B-7 to give him something to do. I thought there would be a follow-on orbital X-15. I didn't want the B-7. That was a bomber. All that enamored with bombers. However, it's probably the most sophisticated airplane we've ever built. It's 20 years technologically ahead of the B-1.
We're looking forward to see that. We're going to the Air Force Museum. I understand you were just there. We should have just met you over there last week.
I was there last week.
Yeah, we're going there.
They have the only
Wednesday.
B-70 left.
That was pretty bad about the crash and everything like that.
Well, if you stop and think, the Russians were tried for 20 years or would like to have been able to shoot down an SR-71. They can't. B-70 has similar performance. That means we would have had for a long time an invulnerable bomber force.
Yeah.
And they would have had to put an awful lot of money and effort coming up with a weapon that would bring it down. So that airplane can fly Mach 3 to Moscow and back from the northern reaches of Canada to refuel. No, it's a phenomenal airplane.
And the poor B-52 that's had to carry that load now.
B-52s are as old as you are.
I know. I've worked on the B-52s. I was in the Air Force for 7 years, and
It's a hell of a good airplane,
Yeah.
but so was a Studebaker wagon.
Can you tell me more about what you're doing today?
Oh, golly, that's hard to tie down. I'm a technical consultant for the House Science and Technology. The House Science and Technology Committee is responsible for just about every research dollar spent by the federal government. And our intent, of course, is to weigh what resources are available and hope that we get the most of importance out of the research buck. All of the space program, for instance, comes out of that, but so the medical research, energy research, fuel, everything. My area has primarily been in the aeronautics side, and more heavily in FAA, trying to bring this rather archaic ATC system around to where we have some 21st century capability, and we've done that. And we'll get another research airplane program going. It's shaping.
Do you have anything to do with the trying to get something like that going, or do you have to wait for an outside agency to come in and say we want to do it?
We don't have to wait for anybody. I've been trying to get it going, and just now we got a little bit of response this year. We very possibly have the single stage to orbit predecessors working, and with all things, it's very delicate. Whether it falls apart one more time, or whether it comes together to begin doing something. I think this time it's going to work.
I hope they do it.
Yes.
Oh, I do too. It's a crime that this country is set back and still flying these aluminum clouds around. No, they have the same technology as the B-17. Better engine.
When do you think we'll get something positive, really going permanently on that?
No idea.
Do you think we'll see it within the next 5 years?
Yes.
You do? Okay.
Once we start the commitment going, then I think it'll. See, there came out of that period of the 60s a terrible disdain for technology and anything good and new. What I call Volkswagen Mafia just came up with absurd reasons for everything, no matter what we did. And that's what I call them. No matter what you want to do, there'll be a bunch of Volkswagen drive up, and a bunch of broad beam women will get out some signs and start marching around the circle. I don't care what it is. I can say, kiss the baby week, and there'd be somebody come up and march around and don't spread AIDS by kissing the baby. I don't. And you get pretty damn discouraged. Not discouraged, but
Disgusted?
scornful.
People go to other countries where they can do the kind of work that they want to do.
Well, it's no better anywhere else. In Germany, they march against everything. In France, they have student riots against everything. In England, they just don't do anything. They all want a free ride on the government and not doing it. So we have the worst system in the world, except for all the others.
That's an interesting way of looking at it.
Here's the way you look at it. And this is why it's going to work. The very thing we've been talking about. This country was designed by engineers, fortunately. The historians and the lawyers had nothing to do with it. The engineering technique is to have a concept, develop criteria from that concept, requirements from the criteria, the performance specification, the detail specification. Then you make the thing and you control it, you discipline it. I call it control. Well, the country was designed that. The concept was freedom. The criteria was the Declaration of Independence. The requirements were the Constitution. The performance spec is the law. The detail spec is the federal code. The administration, Reagan's administration, are the implementing body, and our justice system is the quality control. So the thing will have to work, and eventually will always work, even though there may be glitches. So for that reason, there's no holes in it. we've covered the bases. Well, since then, the lawyers have decided to screw that up, but all they've done is add to the volume of the paperwork surrounding it, not really screwed up the basic concept. Other countries don't enjoy that. If they don't like it, the parliamentary form of government, popular fadism can topple the government. We didn't allow that. We fixed it so that it wasn't allowed. We don't even allow the popular vote to create the government. We break that out into a representative kind of a pyramidal structure. And hopefully that'll prevail, because if fadism does it, then any evangelist that can crank up a lot of people can control the government. So this is what we went through in the 60s, but it's getting straightened out. All of those millions of young people that nobody ever heard about, and they thought weren't there, they're there. They're bright young guys, and now older guys that have become on this thing in control. And all of those people that really wanted a free ride, only were in colleges because of Vietnam. And all of that's kind of gone by the board, or they've got some material things of material value, so they're not quite as free with other people's wealth anymore. But come on, so we get. I didn't mean to lecture.
Oh no, I agree.
Into the extreme people. For instance, this is a very bawdy generation. You're going to see a conservatism come that would make Queen Victoria look like a whore. Mainly because the next generation is going to be able to con their folks, like my kids con me. You know, they've seen it all, they've heard it all, they've done it all. And these kids aren't going to con them a damn bit. And I'll bet you that pendulum swings harder over than it ever was. And then it'll swing. If you look at the Brits, you know, they claim to be people with some taste and manners, but they're the bawdiest people in the world.
Or Contractor.
They swung over Victoria, and they're back. I think it's a disgrace to be a virgin in Britain today. Yeah, I do. When it puts an onus on the name. Go ahead. We deviate.
That's fine. As just on my own personal opinions, I think one of the best things I've heard this last week is they finally got to get the nuclear power system at Diablo Canyon started out there. They finally got rid of all the people that were demonstrating and everything else and said, we're going to get this thing going.
Did they get rid of them, or they just...
I think basically... Yeah, they just drive over them. They use them as speed bumps or something. Yes, it's been 15...
Who feeds those people?
I don't know.
I mean,
I think
none
we
of them
do.
seem to have to work for a living.
They're all drawing their welfare checks and unemployment checks.
Because they're always around this place here. Unfortunately, this place is fortunately they're pretty callous. They wouldn't pay much attention to it. But if you wanted to, you could create an instant crowd that wanted something. They may not know what it is that they came there to be. You could get an instant crowd. All the signs are already
Can you give me your opinion on the space shuttle program? How do you feel we're headed in the right direction finally?
Yeah, my own problem with it is too late. Not too late, but it wasn't sooner. The space station and the space shuttle we should have done many years ago. I was one of the people who thought we should have staged to the moon from Earth orbit. To take the exit and the entry vehicle all the way to the moon and back was a source of considerable argument. It may have been a faster way to do it, I'm not sure. It certainly didn't give us the permanence. You know, again, it was another dead-end operation. Whereas if we had followed the logical engineering route, we would have orbited an X-15, and we would have created a family of things in space that could support life, and we would have had the MOL, so probably would have come along. The dinosaur would have been one of the first useful applications of these new technologies. and we would probably be a lot further along. We might even be as far along as the Russians. See, they spend a tremendous amount of time in space. And they got a vehicle up there that they can shut down and go home and go back and supply and work with. They got another dock to supply them, a lifeboat available to them. And we seem to be disdainful of their efforts. But the country of Seversky and Sikorsky are not technically illiterate. They proved it every time they wanted to in space, as we kicked them. Well, I think we would have been a lot further along, and I believe that Eisenhower was a fool when he made this public declaration that we will only have peaceful utilization of space.
Never happened.
Well, of course it wouldn't happen, but it set the country back for a long time. It took the military out of all of these imaginative things that were so great in the war. Aerospace plane, the dinosaur, the B-70, the manned orbital laboratory, I forget, there's a couple others. And they're marvelous concepts, that were looking ahead. Between Eisenhower's peaceful declaration, and McNamara, who said no technical risk. There's just no imagination in our military today. Absolutely none. They just go out and buy more chrome on a tank than on an airplane. And the F-15 is probably a hell of a lot better airplane than the 105. So I think the shuttle is moving the right way. I wouldn't have done it that way.
How would you have done it?
Oh,
I don't think people at NASA wanted to go that way either, really. Didn't they originally want a manned booster and a more reusable system? They just couldn't get the money for it.
I don't know who NASA. No, hell, this country has poured money in the space program. See, NASA is no one guy. There's a lot of opinions at NASA. And, Max Faget and that crowd didn't ever want to change from blunt bodies. And the military has kind of backed away from supporting its share of the space shuttle. And frankly, I don't think there's a shortage of funds in the space shuttle. If you supplied the fund, what's the principle that says the job will expand to the limit of its resources? I don't think they would move an awful lot faster than they're doing. Maybe even slower, because ingenuity and motherhood of invention is forced by having to figure out how to live within certain limitations. And if you pour money into it, it just takes you longer to discover how to do it when the chips for them.
Yeah, you remind me of, I can't remember who said it, but somebody said that program, they were talking about some program, space program or something like that, that a program like that would take exactly as much time as we've got, or exactly as much money as we've got.
That's right. They're always good. When you stop and think that the research airplane program lasted 25 years, there were 25 configurations of about 9 basic airframes. And the whole damn program in 25 years cost less than one Apollo launch. And it's mainly because of the way we had to do it. I designed, built, rivet, packed my own chutes when we put a drogue chute system on the Skyrock. The first spacesuit, half of it was made in my garage and on my wife's sewing machine. And I mean, it was so. The first ones to fly in a research aircraft were made that way. And we did an awful lot of things like that because we didn't have any money. The first regulator on the suit test console was a $9 regulator button and gas tank. Can you imagine anybody doing that at NASA today with a $1 billion budget? It won't be any better regulator, but it'll have 10,000 mil spec numbers. I'm not knocking that because that same regulator probably has more flaws in it because it's not inspected. But I believe that we would not be ahead if we poured more money into it. There's certain critical mass beyond which it just costs more money. You know, invention is usually, or new and innovative is usually the result of a mistake. And when the government funds it, it just costs more and takes longer to make the mistake. I'm not against the government doing these things. They just don't have any high regard that really pouring money at something is a solution. If we didn't have money, we may have done things differently. Maybe why the Russians are so good. A lot of resources they don't have, so they take a more objective approach to it. Could be. They've got a triple-sonic steel fighter, we don't. They've got a supersonic transport, we don't. They've got a supersonic bomber, we don't. They've got accumulated several man-years in space, we don't. And what they were doing in space was spending, must have been endlessly boring days in space, but they were designing and working with tools. You know, we don't know how to make a wrench that works in space, but they were up there making tools, designing, making, trying. With a man and a woman up there, they're probably doing biological experiments. So we don't have not on our television.
Maybe England, but not the United States.
Really. I'd like to talk about the arts a little bit.
The what?
The arts. The movie The Right Stuff. Were you involved with them? Were you ever consulted? I know that they had somebody playing you in the movie. You never talked to them or anything like that?
I haven't seen the movie. I just tell people I saw the play. No, I won't give the movie credit for by going to see it by what I've heard of. They trashed the president. They trashed Von Braun. They trashed Grissom. Make a sideshow freak out of poor Mrs. Glenn, and they trashed Pancho Barnes, who was a phenomenal aviator and a woman of some breeding. You know, not a coarse barmaid, as I hear they say. I'll have nothing to do with it. The book was kind of fun. The guy didn't pretend to anything but what he was trying out a theme that he couldn't solve and never did.
Everybody in the movie tended to be characters of people. They weren't real.
Well, none of it was real, as I understand. The idea that people just go get in an airplane and fly.
Mm-hmm. Yes, didn't work that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was the thing with Yeager on the NF-104 incident, and they just had the guys in the control tower when he went out there. Oh, it's Yeager. He must have clearance, you know. I mean, it's like, sure he has clearance. He's filed it, I'm sure, but they didn't mention that kind of thing. Do you ever keep in contact with any of the other pilots that you've worked with?
Oh, yeah. I see Yeager quite often. He and I are pretty good friends. Our whole world has a different purpose. I'm a designer and a builder, and he's a pilot. Yeager's view of an airplane is that it's quite opposite of mine. I'm a test pilot to find out what we can do to improve an airplane, and he's a pilot who finds out how we can conquer an airplane. He will not admit that an airplane can have a characteristic that he can't have. And I don't really care. If I handle, well, I care if I handle it or not, but I'm going to fix it. So it isn't a problem. That's my mind. So we have two completely different intents. So all of this crap that's going on about making us competitive, this is no merit to it at all. We were doing entirely different things. He was evaluating for Air Force purposes. I was doing a lot of detailed data gathering to see why things happened the way we did and the way they did, what we should do.
How did you feel about the documentary on the X-15 program that NBC did, the rocket pilots? You had quite a bit of input on
American Adventure?
Yes.
Yeah, I had a little to do with that. I thought it was awfully hokey, but they kept their promise.
You think they did a fairly decent job on keeping the facts right?
Everybody seemed to enjoy it. I made a deal with them that I'd cooperate and work with them on that if they did several things. Number one, they left people with a proud feeling that we do something right, that it was upbeat, not a put down of Mike Wallace. And also with a feeling, that why don't we do things like that anymore? And that when it was over with, that people will have enjoyed it rather than just, have no big message, about how terrible we are, and if it's got a foreign stamp, it's high quality, and something like that. And they did that. And they hokied it up with this Mach 2 competition, the Willie or Won't He. Generally, it was kind of fun. Everybody seemed to like it. I couldn't watch it objectively. So. It didn't pretend to be anything more than a one-shot thing to show some good flight pictures.
It was nice the X-15 finally got a little bit of well-deserved press coverage.
I guess. I don't know why do you want press coverage?
Well, just
I've never been able to discover why people say, well, you ought to get press coverage.
Well, I don't know. Maybe press coverage is the wrong word for it, but
Pain in the ass.
Yeah.
It just adds to the cost and the burden.
mm-hmm.
You can't do anything right. Everybody wants to create a situation out of everything. I'm not a great fan of the press, even though they've always been pretty good to me.
They were calling you the first spaceman for a while and things like that. You were quite popular with them for a while.
As I say, they never say anything right.
Okay. Well, I guess we should probably let you go. Just out of curiosity, do you have any materials or anything that you think might be a help to make a more accurate book or anything? Okay.
I really don't. Long ago, given away everything but the trash. People say, hey, can I have that picture? Sure. And all I end up with
Is there anyone else that you know of that I should be talking to?
on the X-15,
Mm-hmm.
pretty much as cold as yesterday's mashed potatoes right now. The guy that would know more of where the documentation and that stuff would be Dick Halley.
Yes, he was the first person I ever talked to.
Edwards.
Yes.
And he would know more than Edwards now. And somewhere there's got to be an awful lot of NASA stuff in the X-15. You can probably find a lot at North American. Where the devil it is, I don't know. And what you would run into first was all of just PR stuff. But there's got to be a tremendous set of files on all of the difficulties or the correspondence, the design changes, and all of that. If that's a difference, I have no idea.
Yeah, North American's been a little difficult to get into, and I've gotten in there
There
a
is
few
no
times.
North America.
Well, it's North American Aircraft Division.
Yeah.
They still do call it that. But yeah, I've talked to several people there, and
I don't even know where they are.
they're still not too far from where the old plant used to be. They're about 2 miles south of
They
there.
don't have any airplanes.
No.
Up at Palmdale.
Yes. Yeah, everybody's moving to Palmdale now. Yeah, I've gotten some stuff out of the microfilm files and things on the blueprints and such like that.
Can
Yeah. But that's been like pulling teeth too. It's been very hard because everybody wants to, oh, you want to hear about the B-1? We'll tell you about that. But X-15, yeah, it was 20 years
see,
ago.
The company had no interest in anything you're selling airplanes. I'll tell you, if you wanted, the guy that probably, well, he'd long ago had left, it would be Charlie Phelps.
Yes, do you have a way I can get a hold of him?
Yeah, he lives out in, is it Lake Elsinore?
That's not too far from where I live. I'll have to-
Temecula?
And I know the area, yeah.
In that area.
Okay.
All of my papers on the X-15 are burned. You know. But see, I don't have any of the files I kept, my personal files. I kept quite a bit of that. Remember when a Navy F-4 hit an apartment house out near Alameda
Yeah, I think I remember
Airport
that.
and went right down to the basement and burned the whole thing down? Well, my ex-secretary for North American lived in that apartment house, and she had all my papers. I'd asked her, I told her that I'd pay her a stipend to organize them and put them all into some kind of useful form. They were really just the way we packed them up in boxes when we left Los Angeles. But she had them all. And she'd gone out to dinner and this airplane burned down the place, so all of those papers were gone. Every note I ever took in the X-15 was every bit of correspondence.
Okay. Was there any other comments you'd like to make about the X-15?
Really don't know. You realize I got off of that airplane 24 years ago.
I think you've done pretty good on since then.
Well, I've done what I wanted to do. The reason I'm working here is aviation's been very good to me. I feel I owe it a debt. I never made any money out of it, but there's an awful lot of other good things.
Do you still get a chance to fly?
No, I haven't flown for years.
You sold your airplane?
Yeah. Can't afford an airplane now, but when you're flying once a year is like a pianist getting to play a piano once a year. You don't like the music. It hurts. So until I get an opportunity to fly regularly, I'm no interest. But I've never had this great compulsion to fly like many pilots say they feel. I can't see any real reason to go flying after the first hour. It's a pure pleasure. For no purpose of not wanting to get somewhere or do something. Just to sit up in an airplane and look around. It's awful damn boring. Particularly if you ever travel in a slow airplane. Travel cross country in a piper or something like that. That'll get you.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think
You got all
we
your
pretty well
questions?
covered it. Yeah.
I hope so.
Well, I appreciate all your time. and
Probably
everything.
most of this should be off the record.
We'll erase the tape.